without further ado, I would like to let you know that on behalf of Friends of the Lost Coast, Cape Mendocino Lighthouse Preservation Society, and the Bureau of Land Management King Range National Conservation Area, welcome to the final installment of Lighthouses of Humboldt and the Lost Coast, a two-part virtual lecture series. My name is Justin Krellin, Administrative Coordinator with Friends of the Lost Coast, and tonight we will host Brenda McLaughlin in her talk, Cape Mendocino Lighthouse Takes Shelter in the Cove. Before we get started though, Friends of the Lost Coast acknowledge that the land we gather on today are the traditional unceded territory of the Sinkyone and Mattole peoples who have stewarded the land, water, plants, and animals from time immemorial with great respect for the interconnectedness of life and ecological knowledge that is foundational to the health and sustainability of the Lost Coast and its preservation for future generations. Before we begin, a few housekeeping notes. Participants will be muted with cameras off throughout the presentation until the Q&A. Please use the chat feature to seed Q&A questions or to share commentary with the group during the presentation. Now, without further ado, please welcome Brenda McLaughlin, historian with the Cape Mendocino Lighthouse Preservation Society, presenting Cape Mendocino Lighthouse Takes Shelter in the Cove. Thanks for joining us, Brenda, and please take it away.
Thanks, Justin. It's really great to be here this evening. We thank you and the Friends of the Lost Coast for the opportunity to be part of this lecture series about the lighthouses of Humboldt County. Tonight, we're going to delve into the history of the Cape Mendocino Lighthouse from its origin in 1856 to that big move in 1998 to the current location in Shelter Cove. We'll find out how the original location worked for helping ships in the late 1800s and why the lighthouse needed to be moved. We'll explore the details on how every piece of metal, screws, and bolts that were removed from the cliffs of Cape Mendocino to lighthouse reconstruction site. I'll be sharing many historical photos, plus many from the move of the lighthouse and also to the present day. So let's start this adventure on the Lost Coast and the story of the Cape Mendocino Lighthouse. So thank you all for joining us today. It's my pleasure and honor to share with you the story of the Cape Mendocino Lighthouse as part of the Friends of the Lost Coast lecture series. But first, how did my interest develop about this particular lighthouse? Well, I first started visiting Shelter Cove back in 1968. My stepdad and mom, Henry and Hank and Marianne Brimhall, built a house there in 1976 and moved to Shelter Cove permanently in 1990. Like so many in the Cove, they were both very active and became involved in the moving and reconstruction of the Cape Mendocino Lighthouse. Because Dad was a licensed general contractor, he put his profession to use in helping put the lighthouse back together piece by piece with so many volunteers. They were also instrumental in helping raise funds and served on the Cape Mendocino Lighthouse Preservation Society's board. In 1999, Hank was officially named the lighthouse keeper and performed those duties until his passing in 2004. Marianne also served as a docent, where she greeted visitors at the lighthouse until she moved in 2012. Because of their work, they also kept binders full of notes and drawings and minutes of board meetings and lots of pictures of the reconstruction process. As a family, we all took great pride in their involvement, including some labor being done by my brother, Tony Pooch. The notes, binders, photos, stories, and the tales of this feat are now being preserved by me for the family, for the Shelter Cove community, and as the historian of the Cape Mendocino Lighthouse Preservation Society. The Cape Mendocino Lighthouse Preservation Society was formed in 1997 with the ambition of moving and rebuilding the 1856 lighthouse to Shelter Cove. Today, the purpose of this dedicated volunteers is to preserve both the structure and the history and share that community pride to all who visit it. There are many reasons why a lighthouse was needed at the original site at Cape Mendocino back in the mid-1800s. As many of you know, this part of the California coast is wild and rugged. Cape Mendocino is the westernmost point of the continental US, with strong currents and a very rugged shoreline. Shipwrecks were common, with one on January 6, 1860, of the sidewheeler Northerner that hit rocks a mile south of the future site, losing, unfortunately, 38 passengers. Funds from Congress were allocated to start the process in 1856, and steps started shortly after to prepare the site. The tower was designed and fabricated in San Francisco by Joseph Bain. The only way to transport the tower sections and other materials was by sea. The steam tender, Shubrick, and two small sailing ships started to haul the materials with considerable difficulty. Of course they did. Can you imagine this scene? The materials were landed on the beach below and carried up the steep cliffs. During initial efforts in September of 1867, the Shubrick washed ashore amongst the rocks about 30 miles south of Mendocino on the cove's Black Sands beach area. To save the ship, the materials on board were dumped and lost, and then the ship was refloated and went back into service. Eventually, the iron lighthouse and the top piece, the lantern room, were shipped to Eureka and transported by wagons to the site, 40 miles away. Large concrete footings had been poured for the tower. The original lighthouse keeper dwelling materials, made of brick with a steel roof, were shipped and built as well. It's hard to even imagine the entire project being built on this terrain, and makes me sure appreciate our roads today, minus the potholes. When finished, the Cape Mendocino Lighthouse was a pyramidal 16-sided shape made with cast iron. The 43-foot tower was one of the highest in the United States at 422 feet above sea level. The original lens was a first-order Fresnel lens made in France. It weighs about 8,000 pounds with prisms, supports, turntables, and gears. It was installed in 1868 and then removed in 1947 when the lighthouse became automated. Because of this rugged location, the lighthouse had to endure very windy conditions and heavy storms, not kind to the many lighthouse keepers stationed there over the years. In fact, it actually got the nickname the Alcatraz of lighthouses. But can you imagine what the view of the landscape must have been from the top of that lighthouse? I believe this photo is from the early 1900s. Look how they're just kind of standing there, just enjoying the view. Beautiful. After the lighthouse was completed, the lighthouse keeper's dwelling and the storage buildings were done. The footprint you see here is of the buildings and shows how big the complex really was. The beacon was activated for the first time on December 1st, 1868. An earthquake struck on March 2nd of 1870 and badly damaged the house dwelling, and it was necessary to pull it down. So a new one, this time made out of wood, was erected about 300 feet up the hill from the lighthouse. Over the next many decades, the site endured many storms, earthquakes, and a succession of many, many lighthouse keepers. The 1906 earthquake was especially brutal. There are so many stories and tales of these harsh conditions, and it's amazing that the lighthouse lasted even as long as it did. In 1948, the Fresnel lens was removed by the Coast Guard with the commercial power brought to the site. The Cape Mendocino Lighthouse was unmanned on March 3rd, 1951, and became automated with dual arrow beacons. Those are the ones that are pictured in this slide right now. And where did the Fresnel lens go? Well, it was loaned to the city of Ferndale in 1948, where a beautiful replica of the Cape Mendocino Lighthouse was built to support it and shine during the dates of the yearly fair. In 2009, the Coast Guard found the lens again and asked to have it taken out so it could have better care. It was eventually removed and crated and stored at the fairgrounds in a locked, temperature-controlled room, while the city and a committee figured out how to eventually put the lens back on display. Unfortunately, that did not occur, and the U.S. Coast Guard picked up the lens in the fall of 2022, and it is now stored elsewhere in Humboldt County. With the changes made and then the property no longer manned, the buildings sat there deteriorating. They were offered for sale in 1960, and when there were no takers, the U.S. Coast Guard had the deteriorated buildings burned in 1962. The lighthouse now stood there all by itself. Later, the dual arrow beacons were removed from the site, and a new standalone beacon that rested atop a steel pole took over the duties of keeping the seas safer on the Cape. It was finally discontinued in 2013. And as far as I can tell, there's no longer a light there. So I'm assuming that the Coast Guard team, that one is not needed today due to today's technology. Well, this lighthouse in 2013 sure didn't look very nice like our beautiful Cape Mendocino Lighthouse, but it did work. For the next 36 years, the lonely lighthouse sat there rusting away on the cliffs. And with earthquakes and landslides, and of course those big storms, it was threatened with toppling over that 400-foot cliff. The U.S. Coast Guard added the historical lighthouse to its surplus list, and 3 entities came forward interested in its acquisition: the cities of Eureka, Ferndale, and Shelter Cove. Since it is a government property, it could only be sold to an entity. Shelter Cove needed the endorsement of the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors to move forward. By forming the nonprofit Cape Mendocino Lighthouse Preservation Society and doing so much work, research, and developing a plan to move, restore, and fund and maintain the lighthouse, the Humboldt County saw the benefit of having the lighthouse located still on the Lost Coast in Shelter Cove in Mal Coombs Park. They voted unanimously to move forward. The 2 cities in Humboldt County all applied to the Director of Property Disposal Division of the U.S. General Service Administration, and on February 25th, 1996, it was concluded that the donation of the lighthouse to Humboldt County on behalf of the Shelter Cove nonprofit was in the very best interest of the government and, quote, represents optimal utilization and preservation of this historic structure. Wow, the lighthouse can start to make the journey south and claim its new home, thanks to all of this dedication. And a society board president at the time, Jack Sanford, said, quote, this project is not just for Shelter Cove, it's for all of Humboldt County. By being at this location on the coast, it will be enhanced by both its position and accessibility for all, tourists and locals alike. These are articles and pictures that I have that Mom and Dad kept in their albums about some of the moves and things that were going on. There was a lot of really wonderful publicity at the time as well, because everybody was very excited. It took some time for plans to be worked to actually figure out how to move the structure. And in 1998, a contract to Ken Christian, owner of Christian's NC Construction of Eureka, to remove the lantern top part of the tower, which he did do at no cost. So on May 4th, 1998, using a heavy crane, the lantern piece was gently separated by the crew, lifted off and placed on the ground next to the base. Some of the base was also disassembled while waiting for the lantern to be moved. Looks like a fun job, huh? To make this move, there were so many partners and community members that came together to make it happen. With the support of the U.S. Coast Guard, the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors, and the Bureau of Land Management, a lot of the technical issues were being taken care of. Now, fundraising needed to really gear up, as it was estimated that over $100,000 would be needed for the move. And more volunteers would need to gather to actually do the labor. What an undertaking. To help keep folks posted on the amount being raised, a giant whale and thermometer on the Shelter Cove deli wall was painted and updated. Dismantling the lighthouse continued. On November 3rd, 1998, it had been completely dismantled and each section was carefully numbered. It was then trucked and moved to site donated by Whitethorn Construction, about 10 miles east of Shelter Cove, where it was to be repaired, blasted, ready for a new coat of paint. And then next, one of the biggest events about this move was being prepared to take place. Finally, on November 5th, 1998, using a Chinook helicopter, the U.S. Army National Guard secures the lantern and starts the journey south to Shelter Cove. It landed 4 miles away in Cape Town to make sure it would survive the trip and then continue going south. This must have been quite the sight. The much anticipated landing of the lantern was greeted by many, waiting on the spot for its new home. I've heard many stories how exciting it was to see it land and cheered by those on the site. The members of the Army National Guard flight crew who helped with the airlift were greeted by many and were very pleased with their accomplished mission. It's amazing how many were involved in this historic endeavor. And now the lantern top is ready to also be restored on the site. Volunteers started working on the job of cleaning it and the rust and stripping the chipping paint off of it and making sure that the tower was ready. A lot of repairs were also needed due to the age and coastal wear and tear on the cast iron at Whitethorn Construction. Roy Heder and crew worked over 6 weeks on this part of the construction. And there goes the helicopter off after it did its beautiful landing. Thanks. Bye, fellas. During the summer of 1989, the actual reconstruction of the lighthouse began. And over 100 pieces have been worked on at the Whitethorn and were moved. What a beautiful day to be pouring concrete. It took 19 yards in the footings, 5 yards on the floor. So much labor as well as the concrete, which is generally donated by Jim Johnson. So during the summer of 1999, the actual reconstruction of the lighthouse began with over 100 pieces that had been worked on in Whitethorn. The outside uprights are placed and they're numbered where they're dismantled. The pedestal was installed to support the center, including the second floor and the top lantern room. And the scaffolding was erected by Hank Brimhall and Bob Porteous to support the second floor supports. Hank was the job coordinator for the rebuilding of the lighthouse. With the parts scattered around the slab, trying to figure out how they fit together without a set of plans, Hank noticed a cluster of punch marks on one of the legs. With further inspection, he noticed each leg had the same group of punch marks in the same spot, and each one with a different amount, from 1 to 16. After inspecting the other parts, it was noted that most of the parts had these same markings. The copper domed lantern room had real numbers on it, and the 16 numbers were placed counterclockwise. They soon learned, though, it was actually clockwise that they needed to fit together. This was turning into a giant erector set project for all the adults. And it worked. The structure started looking like the base of the lighthouse as more supports were added, along with the occasional pieces having to be made or refitted. Even blocks of ice to curb the temperature were used. And finally, the cast iron walls started to be installed as the supports are secured. Along with a sign showcasing the site, the fellows were sure getting excited. And they got very dirty in making this very good progress. Hank and John Paulson were exceptionally pleased, but very dirty. Since a lot of this work was being done during the summer months, there was always fog. It never stopped the progress, though, but everyone just had to be more careful of the slippery metal. As the construction went on, so did the fundraising. There are many donations given throughout the whole process, from sponsoring specific jobs and materials, all the volunteer work on the site, to endearing fundraising events at the community and many other contributions. There were also donations given from others who had heard about the project, family members near and far, and all around Humboldt County. It was and has been, and still is, a true testament to coming together to honor a historical endeavor by many. With all the steel walls in place, the lighthouse main body was ready for the lantern top. The top was sanded and scraped and finally painted a deep red and the top gold. The glass supports were done in a spar epoxy yellow, and now it's ready to be placed on top. Another big day. Maneuvering the lantern top perfectly to the supports was pretty scary, but they did it. There are lots of bolts and screws to attach and make sure that the lantern was snug. And once again, that group teamwork made it all happen. It was finally a lighthouse. And just reflecting back on the details that had to be accomplished to get there made everyone swell with pride. There are many that were involved, including these folks. Such dedication. This is the director's list from back in the early days. And now it was time to paint the body of the lighthouse, install the glass windows, and button up the hatches. Oh, and yeah, also install a light once again. A 513-foot trench had been dug to bring power to the lighthouse, and a modern Vega light was put in, not for navigation, but to show off the beauty of this historic lighthouse back to its prime. On September 20th, 2000, display boards were installed, and Carol Sullivan from BLM soon had them all covered with lighthouse pictures and interesting historical facts. On September 23rd, a bronze plaque was installed by the clampers. Then a week later, on September 30th, the dedication of the restored Cape Mendocino Lighthouse was held. Beautiful blue skies and calm seas welcomed the guests from near and far as Board Vice President B. Anderson welcomed the guest. There was fanfare, a benediction, history, and stories told. Guest speakers from the Humboldt Board of Supervisors, the Bureau of Land Management, and others congratulated the community's efforts. Board President Roy Hyder and Sam Scott gave out certificates of appreciation and announced that Hank Brimhall had been selected to serve as the official lighthouse keeper for this new shining star in Shelter Cove. The finance officer, Marlene Fondren, gave a report on the funds gathered and also explained how the important docent program that would be used to greet guests. It was an amazing day that concluded with a huge fundraising barbecue event, of course. And now the lighthouse still stands as a beacon of a community coming together. Many photos have been taken, from aerial helicopter views from the sea, looking inland out to the sea, all beautiful. The Cape Mendocino Lighthouse is still growing strong with many volunteers, board members, and docents. They invite you to become involved in any way and appreciate the continued support it receives in the time and with donations. A special recognition was given in June of 2020, when the lighthouse was featured on the front cover and the centerfold of this national publication, Lighthouse Digest. What an honor. A touching tradition has evolved with the lighthouse during Memorial Day, the 4th of July, and Labor Day, when a ceremonial flag is hung for an honored veteran. I know it meant a lot to our family when Dad, Hank Brimhall's flag, was displayed. There have been many flags displayed, always a tribute to the veteran and hung in a place of honor. I was pleased to be asked to do today's lecture, and I thank the Friends of the Lost Coast for this privilege. There were many photos used today from our albums, but others as well. And so many dedicated volunteers that made this move possible, plus continue to keep the light shining. A huge thank you to each and every one of you. I'd also like to dedicate this presentation to my folks, Hank and Marianne, who helped with this historic endeavor and love being part of the Shelter Cove community. Please come visit the gem of a lighthouse on the Lost Coast, where you'll see the pride of its restoration and how it glimmers today. And perhaps you too will capture a sunset. Thank you, and please continue to support the Cape Mendocino Lighthouse Preservation Society. Docents are always needed, plus general upkeep of the lighthouse and the surroundings, and fundraising, and of course, work on the board. It's all part of being on the Lost Coast of California.
All right, thanks so much, Brenda. That was incredible. We got lots of feedback in the chat about how excellent the photos were and just such an awesome story about the lighthouse and bringing it off of Cape Mendocino and how it landed there in Shelter Cove and all that went into it and all the details you shared about the Preservation Society. So just wanted to let you know, if you didn't see the chat, how much good feedback we got. And I'd like to let everybody know that now would be a great time if you're interested to ask questions. You can either put that in the chat, or I'm going to change the security settings here to allow folks to unmute themselves, and it looks like we should be good to go. So if anybody is interested to unmute and ask a question, we would welcome that right now. I guess one question, just because I imagine a lot of people are thinking about it, is in regards to the lens and what we think the potential might be in the future of connecting the lens with the lighthouse. You know anything about that?
Yes, actually, I talked with the Coast Guard today, and was reaffirmed what I had kind of thought, that the crate had been picked up, the lighthouse, the lens had been picked up at the fairgrounds back in the fall. I spoke originally to the fairgrounds and found out that it had been picked up, and then actually talking to that person involved with that was very, very good today. So they have it crated in Humboldt County, and they would love to be able to have it put on display somewhere in the proper environment and everything to have available for people to see again. It's one of only 4 lenses in the United States, so it's very, very valuable and very important. This would be a huge undertaking, but I'm sure it would be one that someone, or hopefully it could end up being in Shelter Cove again. That would be wonderful.
Yeah, that would be. I'm sure the community would really love that. What an asset it is to have this lighthouse in Shelter Cove, and to reconnect those two pieces just seems like would be an awesome next step. So hopefully that'll come to pass. So yeah, for those listening in, we'd like to invite you to turn your cameras off, or turn your audio on and ask a question if you've got one for Brenda about the Cape Mendocino Lighthouse or about the Preservation Society. I guess another question I had was about tours of the lighthouse. I know you all offer tours in the summer, and I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the schedule, when that starts up again and when people are able to take a tour.
Sure. The tours happen in the summertime from Memorial Day through Labor Day, and their lighthouse is open every day. It is a volunteer position, so the docents are there from 11 o'clock to 4 o'clock. And they are more than welcome to, welcome you and really share a lot about the lighthouse. There are great photos there, and you can see the inside of the lighthouse and kind of look up and kind of visualize how it would be to perhaps work in the lighthouse when it was originally on that site at Cape Mendocino, and kind of think about the history and how long this beautiful lighthouse has been around in this world. So it's a really amazing spot to go and visit. And you can look at it. And right now we're not allowed to go up the stairs to go up into the top part of the lantern room because of the staircase and something that's not safe. So we don't allow anybody to go upstairs, but we certainly encourage you to come and visit and look at it. You can look any time of the year, but it'll only be on the outside, except for that part from Memorial Day to Labor Day.
And do you think that will be open at some point to get up top to the higher level, or is that something that's going to be closed to the public for the foreseeable future?
I think we would love to have that happen, but I'm not sure if the insurance company does. So I think that's the stumbling block right now, is the insurance company would not like people to be going up those stairs. So I'm sure it's, perhaps a conversation that could take place and something could happen, but at this point right now, it's definitely that's the reason why.
Thank you. So it looks like we got a question in the chat. So was the lighthouse keeper's house demolished because of its location was also unstable? So they're talking about the original house there at Cape Mendocino.
The original one was demolished because of it being so unstable. It only lasted a couple of years when it was first built, 2 or 3 years. But it's because they built it out of brick, and brick with earthquakes just did not mix, did not work. So when they did rebuild it, a couple of years later, they were able to rebuild it with wood, much, much larger. In fact, I've got the floor plans of it, of what it looked like, and it was very nice originally, and made out of wood. So that would be able to sway and move a little bit with the earthquakes. So, and then that was the one that was burned down eventually in the 60s.
And we've got somebody else who just chimed in saying being a docent is fun and a great way to meet visitors of the Cove. And I guess that's a good segue into how people can come to, become a docent and also learn more about the Lighthouse Preservation Society and how they can support your work.
That's great. Yes, that's wonderful. I think it is a wonderful, wonderful job. And I know Mom thoroughly enjoyed working as a docent, and even though she was with her failing health and everything a little bit, she would still manage to get a ride down there and work as a docent during her shift, because it was just such a wonderful thing to do. But also the amount of people and the amazing people that would come through, people from around the world actually do come to visit this. So being a docent is fabulous, and there's a docent training, so you can really know and feel comfortable talking to the visitors. And you can contact through the website, which is on the last slide that I showed, and or go to our website and find it. And Dale Alexander is the contact person for that. But any of the other Lighthouse board members would be able to help you with that too. And just contact us, and we'll make sure we keep you in tune and get you ready. And then if it's only 1 day a week, that's perfect. 1 day for 4 hours, 4 or 5 hours would be perfect. If it's, maybe grab a pal and the two of you do it every other week. So that way you're not doing it every week through the summer. But it's a lot of fun, and and what a beautiful place to be out there working as well.
Absolutely. I noticed on your website that there is a docent guidebook. So it seems like for people who want to learn more about what the job entails and about the history, that's a great resource for folks to learn more about the lighthouse and also consider becoming a docent. I see Evan put the link to the website in the chat. Again, it's CapeMendocinoLighthouse.org. And yeah, lots of great information there, and you can support their work on the website as well. So are there any other questions out there? This is your last chance to chime in. Feel free to turn your camera on or your audio on and join us that way, or put something in the chat. And somebody says they're having issues unmuting. So let me see if I can. Thought I'd asked everybody to unmute, but. Can you hear me? Okay, so now I've asked everybody to unmute. So for that person, if you want to turn your audio on, that would be great. Hello, Frank, are you with us? You got a question, Frank? All right, well, anybody have a question here?
I did see, Justin, that Cynthia Eden, who is a librarian for the Shelter Cove Library, mentioned that a copy of the Lighthouse Digest, the magazine I mentioned, is available to look at the library. So.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it seems like folks are having trouble joining, but I'm going to try to bear with me here. I'll try to allow that. Otherwise, I'd encourage folks to just put their question in the chat if possible, so that we don't.
Hi, Brenda, it's Kim.
Hi.
Hi. Oh my gosh, what a great presentation. It was beautiful. I love it. And it seems like I've seen some of those pictures already. So yeah, I'm like, I know some of those people.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks. Yeah.
Nice.
Thank you very much. I'm happy that you're able to watch it today. It was put together with a lot of love and a lot of history for sure of family members and all of the friends and all the people in the Cove that worked so hard.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else out there that wants to join us for a question or put one in the chat? Let's see, it looks like we have yep, so a personal note for you, but just someone saying that what a beautiful and informative presentation, and your parents and all involved, all the volunteers would be so happy and impressed. So absolutely. It's great to see such a labor of love and such a community asset at the same time. So
Justin?
yeah,
Yeah, there is a chat question. Is there public access to the original site of the lighthouse?
can you speak to that, Brenda?
I think if you're a mountain goat, perhaps, I believe there is. I'm not sure how safe it is. It would be my only concern, I guess. I know some years ago, about 2010, Yul Hauser, who was the MC or the host of California Gold, which is a PBS program, did a great visit to the original site. And of course, the lighthouse was already gone. And he did a whole program, a whole segment on the lighthouse, and that aired on PBS nationwide. That was just fabulous. And he started his presentation there at the old site, was nothing but bare ground, beautiful view, very, very windy. And he and B. Anderson started there, and then they took the drive from there on the back roads through Petrolia and everything, and then ended up in Shelter Cove, where he found what happened to it, what happened to the lighthouse. So
So it says no public access. The ground still belongs to the Coast Guard, but you have to cross private land to access. Thank you, Joyce.
I
All
do
right,
remember.
well,
I do remember reading that there was that because of the private land that you had to access, that private land was used a lot by cattle grazing, and that the poor lighthouse keepers had to really, really keep anything around their yards and everything blocked and sheltered from the cattle that would come up. So definitely private access, private land there too. Yeah.
all right. Well, any other questions out there? Seems like chat's working better than audio for most of you, but if somebody specifically wants to ask a question via audio, let me know in the chat and I'll see what I can do to get that audio turned on. Otherwise, yeah, looks like we're at the end of our Q&A. So I would like to thank you for coming out on behalf of Friends of the Lost Coast and the VLN King Range National Conservation Area. Many thanks to Brenda McLaughlin and the Cape Mendocino Lighthouse Preservation Society for this lecture. We hope you found it educational and inspiring. Visit lostcoast.org, Facebook, or our YouTube channel for a recording of the lecture, which will be posted in the coming days. Thanks again for tuning in, and to learn more about Friends of the Lost Coast or to make a donation to support our work, including programs like this lecture series, please visit our website at lostcoast.org. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, and now TikTok. And to learn more about the Cape Mendocino Lighthouse Preservation Society, please visit capemendocinolighthouse.org. Enjoy the rest of your evening and all the best from Friends of the Lost Coast. Thanks again, Brenda and everybody else, and good night.
Good night. Thank you.